N'Golo Kanté was a simple man despite his worldwide fame. A World Cup champion, a star in European football, and a rare example of humility in the sports world, he never let stardom get to his head. Even with a millionaire's bank account, he continued to live discreetly, always avoiding the spotlight. That day, Kanté was on his way to his homeland to take care of an important family matter. The French midfielder of Malian descent always maintained strong ties with his family and made a point of visiting his relatives whenever he could. However, to avoid commotion and fan attention, he decided to travel discreetly. He wore a simple hoodie, training pants, a low baseball cap covering part of his face, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. He didn't want to attract any attention. For years, he had been accustomed to traveling in first class, not for luxury but for comfort and privacy, especially on long flights. But unlike other celebrities who insisted on showing off wealth and exclusivity, Kanté never behaved arrogantly. To him, first class was simply a place where he could rest without interruptions. Upon arriving at the airport, he quickly passed through check-in. His first-class ticket was printed, and he walked to the boarding gate without drawing any attention. However, a small administrative error went unnoticed. A mix-up in the airline system caused his ticket to be registered incorrectly. What should have been a smooth journey was about to turn into an unforgettable incident. As soon as he boarded the plane, Kanté wasted no time. Accustomed to the exhausting routine of football, every moment of rest was valuable to him. So he went straight to his first-class seat, settled in, and closed his eyes. He barely noticed that boarding was still in progress. Passengers continued to board while the flight attendants helped organize seating arrangements. Among them was Claire, an experienced and dedicated flight attendant who, that morning, was particularly overwhelmed. Besides the nearly full flight, there was an administrative issue with some tickets, including Kanté's. As she reviewed the occupied seats, Claire noticed a seemingly ordinary man sitting in first class. He was dressed simply, with no signs of luxury, and was so comfortable that he didn't even notice her approaching. To the flight attendant, who dealt daily with passengers trying to sneak into better seats without paying, this seemed like just another case of someone taking advantage of the situation. She checked the passenger list again, but due to the airline's error, Kanté's name did not appear in the first-class records. Without realizing who was in front of her, Claire took a deep breath and in a professional tone said, "Sir, I believe there has been a mistake. This seat is reserved for first-class passengers." Still drowsy, Kanté slowly opened his eyes. He blinked a few times before realizing what was happening. "Ah, but this is my seat," he said in his usual calm voice. Claire forced a polite smile, but was already prepared to deal with resistance. "Sir, please check your ticket. Your seat may be in economy class. I can help you find the correct one." Kanté frowned slightly, confused. He knew he had purchased a first-class ticket, but not wanting to cause trouble, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his ticket. He handed it to Claire, who quickly analyzed it. However, due to the airline's mistake, the system did not recognize that seat as his. The flight attendant sighed. It was the third time that day someone had tried to enter first class without authorization, and her exhaustion prevented her from noticing Kanté's peaceful tone. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I must ask you to vacate this seat immediately. We have passengers with confirmed reservations." "But I really bought this seat," he tried to argue, still without raising his voice. Kanté's insistence made Claire lose patience. She didn't like conflicts, but she also didn't have time to argue. "Sir, if you don't cooperate, I'll have to call security. We don't want to cause a problem here." Kanté blinked, surprised. He wasn't used to being approached like this. Usually, when people recognized him, they were polite and even a bit exaggerated in their admiration. But Claire clearly had no idea who he was. The moment grew tense. Some passengers were already paying attention to the conversation, and murmurs began to spread throughout the cabin. Claire, impatient, signaled to one of the security agents standing at the plane's entrance. "Please call security." Kanté's expression remained calm, but inside, he wondered how something so simple had turned into such a situation. He knew he wasn't the type of person to cause trouble, but now he was caught in a misunderstanding that seemed to be getting worse. The murmurs among the passengers grew as one of the security guards approached. Kanté remained seated, his expression calm, but internally he was trying to figure out how to resolve the situation without making things worse. He didn't like drawing attention to himself, much less being the reason for a public scene. The flight attendant, impatient, crossed her arms as she waited for the security guard to position himself beside the seat. "Sir, we've already asked you to leave first class. Now please stand up and come with us to avoid further trouble." The security guard, a tall and burly man, looked at Kanté with a neutral expression, waiting for his reaction. To him, this was just another passenger refusing to follow the crew's instructions. Kanté let out a low sigh. He knew he had purchased that ticket. He knew that was his seat. But he also knew that insisting too much could make things worse. He decided to cooperate. "All right," he said calmly, beginning to stand up. At that moment, a passenger sitting by the window looked at him more closely. His face seemed familiar. Another passenger on the other side of the aisle also began to stare at the man in the hoodie and cap who was about to be escorted out of first class. Then, one of them whispered to the other, "Wait, this guy, he looks a lot like N'Golo Kanté." The information spread like wildfire. More and more passengers started looking at him carefully. Some pulled out their phones, searching for pictures of the football player online. "Oh my God, I think it really is him," someone said in a low voice, but loud enough for others to hear. The situation began to shift. A bold passenger, now certain that it was Kanté, decided to intervene. "Hey, I think you're making a mistake. This man is N'Golo Kanté." Claire frowned and turned to the man who had spoken. The security guard also hesitated for a moment, trying to process the information. "Who?" Claire asked, visibly impatient. Another passenger held up their phone, showing her a picture of Kanté in a French national team jersey. The blue uniform and his characteristic smile left no doubt. "He's one of the greatest footballers in the world." The flight attendant turned back to Kanté, her face beginning to lose color. She then realized that his tranquility wasn't arrogance, that his insistence wasn't defiance. The man in front of her wasn't just another passenger trying to sneak into first class, he was one of the most respected athletes on the planet. A brief silence filled the cabin. Passengers started speaking up, some outraged by how Kanté had been treated. "Are you seriously trying to kick N'Golo Kanté out of first class? This has to be a joke. A guy like him would never do something wrong. He's one of the most humble people in football." The commotion grew. Some passengers stood up in protest, demanding that the airline apologize immediately. Others started recording, sensing that this could turn into a scandal if not resolved quickly. Claire, now completely flustered, turned to the security guard and a supervisor who had approached after noticing the disturbance. We need to check his ticket again. There must have been a mistake." The supervisor took Kanté's ticket, checked the system, and after a few seconds of awkward silence, swallowed hard before saying, "His ticket is valid. He has a confirmed first-class seat. There was an administrative error." Claire's face filled with regret. She turned red with embarrassment as she realized the gravity of what had happened. She had treated one of the most respected men in sports as if he were an opportunist trying to cheat the system. The passengers started booing. "Shame on you! How could you do this? She should be taken off the plane." The tension escalated, and Claire felt the weight of their words. Her eyes welled up with tears. The supervisor looked at the crew, realizing that the situation was spiraling out of control, and made a drastic decision. Given the commotion caused, the airline has decided that flight attendant Claire will leave this flight. We need to avoid further disruptions for the passengers. A chorus of approval echoed through first class. Claire, utterly humiliated, lowered her head and started walking away, ready to leave the aircraft. As she moved down the aisle under the passengers' harsh stares, guilt consumed her. Then Kanté, who had remained silent almost the entire time, finally spoke. "Wait." Everyone turned to him. Claire stopped, hesitant, unsure of what to expect. There's no need for that, Kanté said, his voice serene. She was just doing her job. There was a mistake, and now we know. Everyone makes mistakes. A hush fell over the cabin. Claire looked up surprised. Even after all the humiliation he had endured, Kanté didn't want her to be punished that way. He understood that she was just trying to maintain order on the plane and that the situation had escalated due to a misunderstanding beyond her control. The passengers exchanged glances. Some were still indignant, but Kanté's attitude made them reconsider their reactions. Slowly the boos faded, replaced by murmurs of respect for the footballer's character. Claire, eyes glistening, took a deep breath and gave a slight bow as a sign of respect. I'm so sorry, Mr. Kanté. I was unfair to you. He simply smiled in his characteristic friendly and unpretentious way. It's all right. Just try to have a little more patience next time. The supervisor, seeing that the situation had been resolved, decided to let Claire stay on the flight, but asked her to take a break to regain her composure. Kanté returned to his seat, and the plane finally prepared for takeoff. The tense atmosphere had disappeared, and now many passengers looked at him with admiration, not just for what he did on the field, but for the person he was off it. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the atmosphere in first class gradually calmed. The tension had faded, replaced by admiration and respect for Kanté. Some passengers still murmured about what had happened, while others simply sat in quiet reflection, surprised to have witnessed such a rare act of kindness. Kanté settled back into his seat, adjusted the headrest, and closed his eyes for a moment. The hum of the engines grew louder, signaling that the aircraft would soon be airborne. But before he could fully relax, he felt a presence beside him. It was Claire. She had gathered the courage to approach him again, despite the embarrassment still weighing on her. Now calmer, she stood with her hands clasped together, hesitant. Mr. Kanté, she began, her voice softer and more restrained than before. I know I've already apologized, but I just want to say again how sorry I am for what happened. Kanté opened his eyes and looked at her with the same calm and gentle expression he had maintained all along. I understand, he replied without hesitation. You were just doing your job. Claire bit her lip, as if still processing everything. But I was unfair to you, she continued. I should have been more patient and understanding. I judged you by your appearance, and that was a mistake. He smiled slightly, showing no trace of resentment. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is learning from them. His simple and sincere response made Claire exhale deeply. She wasn't used to dealing with passengers who reacted this way. Most of the time, those who traveled in first class were demanding, entitled, and unwilling to forgive even the smallest mistakes. But here was N'Golo Kanté, one of the most famous footballers in the world, treating her with nothing but kindness. Thank you, she said, nodding slightly before stepping away. The flight proceeded smoothly after takeoff. The cabin crew resumed service, and gradually, the passengers returned to their books, movies, and conversations. But Kanté's presence remained the main topic of discussion. One by one, some passengers began to gather the courage to approach him. First, a young man wearing a French national team jersey who had been seated in business class hesitantly asked if he could take a photo. Kanté smiled and agreed without hesitation. Then, an elderly gentleman commented on how much he admired his humility both on and off the field. A little girl traveling with her parents initially seemed too shy, but after noticing how approachable Kanté was, she finally asked for an autograph. With each interaction, Kanté maintained the same warmth and simplicity. He spoke with everyone without rushing, thanked them for their kind words, and treated each person as if they were an old friend. At one point, a businessman who had witnessed the earlier incident spoke up, loud enough for others to hear. This man could have turned that situation into a worldwide scandal, but instead, he chose to forgive and move on. That's true character. The passengers around them nodded in agreement, some even applauding softly. It was rare to see someone in a position of power and influence choose humility over pride. A flight attendant who had served in first class before and recognized Kanté from previous trips approached him with a friendly smile. Mr. Kanté, We usually offer first-class passengers a special drink or meal, but I think you deserve something even better." She handed him a small token of appreciation from the airline, a luxurious pen, accompanied by a handwritten note from the crew apologizing for the misunderstanding. Kanté chuckled lightly and accepted the gift, shaking his head slightly. "Thank you," he said, placing it in his bag without any sign of bitterness. The rest of the flight passed without further incidents. After so many interactions, Kanté finally managed to get some rest, and when the landing announcement came, several passengers took the opportunity to give him one last nod or smile. As the plane taxied to the gate, Claire made sure to be near the exit to say goodbye to him personally. "I hope your trip back is much smoother, Mr. Kanté," she said with a genuine and warm smile. He shook her hand gently. "I'm sure it will be. Take care." With that, he stepped off the aircraft and walked toward his next destination. At the airport, as he made his way through the terminal, a small group of passengers from the same flight continued to discuss him. "He's really different from other famous athletes. No wonder everyone loves him. If the world had more people like him, it would be a much better place." But Kanté didn't hear any of it. He was already focused on his journey ahead, ready to take care of his family matters with the same tranquility and humility that defined every part of his life. For him, this flight had been just another ordinary day. But for those who witnessed it, it was an unforgettable lesson in character and humanity.